This is a case many of you have probably heard of, but perhaps never in its full, harrowing detail. This is the story of Junko Furuta, a crime so brutal it is often described as one of the most horrific in human history. Junko was born in Misato, Saitama Prefecture, Japan. She lived with her parents, an older brother, and a younger brother. She was a diligent high school student who also worked part-time at a plastic molding factory. Saving money for a graduation trip she was eagerly planning, she had already lined up a job at an electronics store after graduation. Junko was popular and well-liked. She maintained excellent grades, rarely missed school, and was admired for being active, bright, and attractive. Yet her very success and clean reputation made her a target for envy. She didn't drink, didn't smoke, and stayed away from drugs, something that made her stand out, and in the eyes of the rougher crowd at school, made her uncool. One of those boys was Hiroshi Miyano, a known bully and one of the few teens in the area connected to the Yakuza. He developed an attraction to Junko and propositioned her. When she refused, he took it as a deep insult. For someone like Hiroshi, used to being feared and never defied, rejection was intolerable. Humiliated, Hiroshi plotted revenge. Along with a group of his delinquent friends, he came up with a plan. One boy would ambush Junko, and Hiroshi would step in as her rescuer. Once he gained her trust, he could lead her wherever he wanted. On November 25th, 1988, Junko was riding her bike home from work when a boy attacked her, knocking her down. Hiroshi just happened to be nearby. He scared the boy off and offered to walk Junko home. Grateful, but still wary, Junko reluctantly accepted, never suspecting what was about to unfold. Instead of taking her home, Hiroshi lured Junko into an abandoned warehouse. There, he revealed his Yakuza ties and brutally assaulted her. Afterwards, he brought her to a hotel, where he called his friends, Joe Ogura and Yasushi Watanabe, who joined him in further attacks. This wasn't the first time the group had done something like this. Just weeks earlier, they had targeted another victim. But this time, they decided Junko would not be released. Not only were they enjoying their cruelty too much, but they also feared she might go to the police. The next day, Hiroshi took Junko to a park where Ogura, Watanabe, and a fourth boy, Nobuharu Minato, were waiting. They discovered her home address and threatened to kill her entire family if she tried to escape. From there, the four boys brought Junko to Minato's house, where she would remain captive. For 42 agonizing days, she was subjected to unspeakable abuse. When Junko's parents reported her missing, her captors forced her to call home and claim she had run away to stay with a friend, even begging her mother to stop the search. To the outside world, the boys pretended she was simply one of their girlfriends. But behind closed doors, Junko was stripped of her freedom, her dignity, and ultimately, her humanity. Junko's nightmare only grew worse. Day after day, the boys assaulted her relentlessly, often taking turns. They bragged openly to their friends about having a woman trapped for their use, even inviting others to join in. Within the first few days, more than 30 people had violated her, and at least 100 knew of her imprisonment. Disturbingly, even women were brought over to witness the spectacle. One young girl cruelly scrawled on Junko's face with a pen. By the end of the first week, Junko's humanity had already been stripped away. She was forced to remain naked at all times, constantly beaten, humiliated, and even shoved into the freezer for hours, only to be dragged out when they wished to torture her again. What makes this even more appalling is that Minato's brother and parents lived in the same house. His brother once commented that Junko might die soon, but did nothing. His parents, aware of their son's violent temper and Yakuza ties, were too afraid to intervene. Even worse, they were more concerned about protecting their family's reputation than saving her life. After about 10 days, Junko's body was already failing. The endless beatings had left her sinuses so full of blood that she could no longer breathe properly through her nose. Her digestive system shut down. Any food or water she tried to consume was immediately vomited back up, leaving her severely dehydrated. Each time she vomited, the boys grew furious and beat her even more, trapping her in a cycle of torment with no escape. When winter nights grew colder, they forced her to sleep outside on the balcony, exposed to freezing temperatures. At one point, a visitor who had witnessed the abuse confided in his brother, who then alerted the police. 2 officers were dispatched to investigate. When they arrived at the Minato home, the parents calmly insisted there was no girl there. Shockingly, the police accepted this at face value. They didn't check a single room and simply left. By the 20th day, Junko was unable to walk. Her legs had been doused with lighter fluid and set on fire, leaving horrific burns. The repeated attacks had destroyed her muscles, and her hands had been smashed with dumbbells until her bones shattered and her fingernails split apart. One night, after her captors had been drinking heavily, Junko saw her only chance. She dragged herself painfully down the stairs, reached the phone, and managed to dial the police. An officer answered. But before she could speak, Hiroshi snatched the receiver and coolly said, "Wrong number." He hung up and dragged Junko back to the bedroom. For her attempt to escape, the punishment was brutal. The boys held her down, taunting her with candle flames, before once again soaking her in lighter fluid and setting her body ablaze. When she began convulsing, they laughed, claiming she was faking it, and set her on fire again before extinguishing the flames. Miraculously, she survived, but at that point, she begged them to kill her and end the suffering. They refused. Soon after, they discovered a new way to torment her. They held her head against the concrete floor while others jumped on it, causing unimaginable pain. By the 30th day, Junko's body was deteriorating beyond repair. She could no longer urinate normally. Her genitals had been destroyed by repeated burns from cigarettes and lighters. Junko's torment only escalated. Her captors forced various foreign objects into her body, many of them sharp and jagged. At times, they even inserted fireworks, not just into one part of her body but into her mouth, ears, and anus as well. The damage left her nearly deaf, with her eardrums shattered. Her hands and feet had been beaten so badly that she could no longer grip or walk. At best, she could crawl, and even the simplest movement, like dragging herself to the bathroom, took her over an hour. A later medical report revealed that her brain had begun to shrink from the trauma she endured. By then, her appearance was so disfigured that the boys no longer found her attractive. While she suffered, they targeted someone else. Using the same method of luring and deception, they abducted another 19-year-old woman and subjected her to gang rape. For 44 days, Junko Furuta endured what can only be described as unimaginable hell. She was raped multiple times every single day, with over 100 men believed to have violated her before it was over, sometimes up to a dozen in a single day. She was humiliated constantly, forced to remain naked, degraded, and made to perform for their amusement. Many attackers urinated on her, and she was forced to pleasure herself on command. The physical abuse was equally relentless. She was beaten daily with golf clubs, iron rods, bamboo sticks, and other weapons. Dumbbells were dropped onto her body, and her head was slammed face first into the floor. Hot wax was poured across her face, especially her eyelids, which were also burned with cigarettes and lighters. The cruelty extended to forcing objects into her body: bottles, both broken and whole, iron bars, scissors, needles, skewers, and more. She was barely given food or water, often starved until she resorted to eating cockroaches or drinking urine. At one point, fireworks were shoved into her, causing horrific burns. Her left nipple was ripped off with pliers. She was tied down flat and had dumbbells dropped onto her abdomen with such force that she lost control of her bowels. The abuse became ritualistic. She was hung from the ceiling and used as a human punching bag, burned, stabbed, and mutilated in ways almost too cruel to comprehend. Junko's torture continued in unimaginable ways. She was shoved into a freezer and kept there for hours at a time. Whenever she tried to close her eyes in fear, the boys burned her eyelids with hot wax or cigarette lighters. Sewing needles were stabbed into her breasts, sometimes left inside her body. Her genitals were repeatedly burned with cigarettes and lighters. In one of the most horrific acts, they inserted a lit light bulb into her and moved it around until it shattered. By this stage, Junko was unrecognizable. Her facial features had been destroyed, her body crippled and broken, and she smelled as though she were already decomposing. She was continuously bleeding heavily from her injuries, struggling to breathe through blood that filled her sinuses. On day 40, New Year's Day, Junko lay completely immobile, begging for death. 3 days later, on January 4th, the boys forced her to play a game of solitaire. Even in her shattered condition, she managed to win. Enraged, they beat her savagely with an iron barbell, then doused her body with lighter fluid, covering her arms, legs, stomach, and finally her face, even pouring it into her eyes. They lit her on fire. She weakly tried to put out the flames, but her body no longer had the strength. The torture lasted for 2 excruciating hours. Already barely alive, Junko went into shock and finally succumbed the next day. Panicked, the boys stuffed her body into a 55-gallon oil drum, filled it with concrete, and dumped it at a construction site in Koto, Tokyo. A strand of her long hair stuck out from the top, unnoticed by her killers. For a while, it seemed this crime might never be uncovered. But 2 weeks later, during questioning about another gang rape, Hiroshi accidentally confessed. Believing the police already knew everything, he revealed where Junko's body had been hidden. Soon after, the others were arrested. When the barrel was opened, police found Junko's body in a horrifying state. Her mother collapsed upon hearing the details and was later hospitalized long-term in a psychiatric ward. The autopsy revealed even more horrors. Small bottles still lodged in her body, a severely damaged uterus showing signs of pregnancy, and a face so mutilated that she had to be identified by fingerprints. Although the boys were juveniles, a Japanese magazine, Shukan Bunshun, exposed their identities, declaring that their crimes were too monstrous for them to deserve anonymity. Their names were published: Hiroshi Miyano, 18, Joe Ogura, 18, Nobuharu Minato, 16, and Yasushi Watanabe, 17. Their trials shocked the public. Many people fainted upon hearing the details in court. Yet, despite the unimaginable cruelty, they received shockingly light sentences, even after being retried as adults. To this day, the leniency of their punishment remains one of the most enraging aspects of the case. Shockingly, the boys were not charged with murder. Instead, prosecutors went with a lesser charge, causing bodily injury resulting in death. Under Japan's juvenile justice system, the focus is placed more on rehabilitation than on punishment, and that meant their sentences were far lighter than anyone could have imagined. Hiroshi, the ringleader, received 20 years. Minato was sentenced to just 5 to 7 years. Watanabe got 9 years, and Joe received 8. Even those numbers were the result of an appeal. Their original sentences were even lower. The leniency sparked outrage, and many questioned whether their connections to the Yakuza played a role in shielding them from harsher punishment. By now, every one of the 4 has been released. 3 served less than 8 years. Hiroshi's original sentence was 17 years. But when he appealed, the judge actually increased it to 20. The same happened for two of the others. The fourth boy avoided appealing after seeing that trend. Still, all of them walked free long before those sentences were ever fully served. And yes, many of them returned to crime. Nobuharu Minato, who later changed his name to Shinji, married a Romanian woman and had a daughter. But the marriage collapsed, and custody went to his ex-wife. Minato couldn't leave violence behind. He was arrested again for the attempted murder of a businessman. Witnesses say Minato beat the man with a baton and then slashed his throat with a knife before fleeing. Police eventually caught him, though he claimed he only intended to beat the man. Joe Ogura, who later went by Joe Kamisaku, was released in 1999. He openly bragged about his role in Junko's torture, though his father tried to atone by offering Junko's family their entire life savings. Joe stole that money to fund his own lifestyle. His mother went so far as to vandalize Junko's grave, blaming her for ruining her son's life. Joe married a Chinese woman, divorced, then dated again. In 2004, he was arrested for kidnapping and beating a man he thought was seeing his girlfriend. During the attack, he told the victim, "I've killed before, and I'll do it again." He went to prison for 4 years but has been free since 2009. Hiroshi Miyano, the ringleader, went straight back into gang activity after release. He was later arrested for fraud, but escaped major consequences. Today, he lives a relatively normal life, even frequenting a kickboxing gym. Some say he lives better now than he deserves. Yasushi Watanabe is the only one of the 4 who hasn't been arrested again since his release. His current whereabouts are largely unknown. Meanwhile, police eventually tied DNA from the crime scene to at least 2 more men, Koichi Ihara and Tetsu Nakamura, who were arrested years later. It's widely believed that many others who assaulted Junko have never been revealed publicly. So, there it is, the case that many consider the single worst crime in modern history. The brutality, the length of her suffering, and the sheer number of people involved are beyond comprehension. And the fact that those responsible walked free after such light sentences is something that still enrages anyone who learns of Junko Furuta's story. The verdict was in, but the nightmare was far from over. Be safe out there.